Good morning and welcome to all joining us today. My name is Adele Kroch and I'm from Food Focus, and it's a pleasure to thank the Dairy Standard Agency for sponsoring this webinar. This is the 8th webinar this year, and the positive feedback we are receiving from industry shows that the webinars are adding value, and it's great being part of it. The webinars will be recorded and the slides will also be available with the recording. And this is available on Food Focus website after today. We normally try to post it by Friday. The DSA is surely achieving their objective to support and interact with industry, and all of this to promote the improvement of the quality of milk and other dairy products in the interest of the consumers. We have a very interesting topic today, and the topic is the prudent use of agricultural chemicals on milk production farms. Now, I thought to myself, that word prudent, what does it really mean? And I had a look, and it means acting with or showing care and thought for the future. So I'm handing over to Jompie Burger from the DSA that is going to introduce the speaker today. So Jompie, over to you, and Gerard, please introduce Gerard to the audience.
Thank you, Adele. It's really a privilege to introduce, and I will say the word just once because I've been told not to use Dr. Gerard by any means because there's a penalty on it. But I think respectfully that's the right thing to do. And just to say that Dr. Gerard achieved his PhD in synthetic organic chemistry at the University of Johannesburg. It doesn't say when, but I can think it. If I look at Gerard, it wasn't last year. So yes, he's published over 84 popular articles on conservation and responsible use of pesticides annually, and present radio programs on environment, pest management, and conservation. Gerard is currently the Operations and Stewardship Manager of CropLife South Africa. He is also the Director of the Griffin Poison Information Center, offering services for advice on exposure to pesticides and other poisons and management of chemical disasters such as fires, spills, and road accidents. Gerard also presents workshops and training courses on responsible pesticide use and is a guest lecturer at the School of Clinical Pharmacology at the University of Stellenbosch. He is also a steering committee member at the chair in the plant health at the University of Stellenbosch. And then Gerard also acts as the special advisor to the law enforcement agencies on chemical and biological substances that may be used in chemical and biological warfare. I nearly said welfare, sorry. But Gerard, thank you very much for availing yourself for this session. We really appreciate it, and we do consider this topic of immense importance in terms of sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, and yeah, there we go, Gerard. At least the audience can see your face now, not just only your eye. Thank you, Jompie, for that introduction. And Gerard, I'm going to hand over to you now. And we are really looking forward to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Technology. So I'm going to just be talking today about a few themes around the safe storage of agricultural remedies, but I also include stock remedies on dairy farms because they're both basically pesticides. And then touch on the principles of what labels stand for, and then focus quite a lot on the safe use practices of agricultural remedies and stock remedies on dairy farms, and give you some idea of preventing the risks, because remember, we work with hazardous chemicals when you use any agricultural remedy or a stock remedy on the farm. And lastly, talk about what to do once you've done the job. In other words, the post-application decontamination, that will be self-decontamination, and also what to do with your equipment and empty container management once you're done with your agricultural chemical application. Okay, so first of all, just a few short notes on the safe storage of your agrochemicals and pesticides and stock remedies on a farm. I've been to many farms in this country and in other parts of Africa and other parts of the world for that matter. And it's always shocking to me to see how poorly pesticides are managed on farms and exceptionally poorly they stored on farms. And the basic principle is always that your pesticide should be in, preferably, if you look on the right-hand side, a standalone building, or if it is going to be part of a bigger store on a farm, then there should be a firewall separating your other commodities from the pesticides in the store. For the simple reason that, remember, pesticides, or I include now in the word pesticide the agrochemicals and also stock remedies, they are hazardous chemicals of nature, and you don't want anything like a food commodity or your equipment or your fertilizer to be contaminated by them. So therefore, the principle is always chemicals should be on their own in their own store and not be mixed with anything else. Because people always tell me, yeah, but we've never had an accident. But you don't know when the accident is coming. And when the accident comes, believe me, I've seen them. I've been there. I've been on a fire on the farm, and I've been at fires at warehouses. And it is a spectacular disaster. So the best way to prevent a disaster is to have your chemicals completely separated out from anything else on a farm. And in our country in particular, well, maybe for that matter around the world, it is a very good principle to warn anybody coming close to your pesticide store that there are toxic chemicals in the store. And we promote or advocate amongst all our farmers in the country that any pesticide store on the farm should have a large display board of about 1 meter diameter by 750 high, and that you've got all the signal words on that in red and 75 millimeter high script so that people can see. So you must always have those yellow markers up there with skull and crossbones that people see, whatever language they speak, whatever culture they are. That's always a signal to anybody that there's something dangerous in that particular store, which is true because we're working with hazardous chemicals that are dangerous, and that you indicate to people that you're not allowed to enter without being authorized, and you don't enter that particular store without the appropriate personal protective equipment. And then there's a lot of other information that needs to go onto the board, which I don't want to go into too much detail because that is not the purpose of today's meeting. But it should be a sign to warn people that we're sitting here with a store situation where there's something in the store that might cause harm to the environment or to people's health if people don't act properly. Now, these are some examples of the good and the bad. And I first want to go into the scripts and tell you about things that need to be done. First of all is that, like I said in the beginning, pesticides on their own. In other words, no fertilizers, no animal feeds, no fuels or lubricants may be in a pesticide store. Now, pesticides, some of them have quite a pungent odor, and that's because they are volatile. And you can imagine if that volatile herbicide goes into your fertilizer and you apply the fertilizer on a crop field, anything can happen to your crop. So fertilizers may not be there. Animal feeds, obviously in the case of a dairy farm, animal feeds are crucial to your dairy operation and your safety and the health of your dairy cows. And imagine if those animal feeds become contaminated with any pesticide, whether fungicide, herbicide, insecticide. It might not cause harm to the animal, but it might eventually transpire in the end of the food chain that that chemical becomes a residue which is detected then by an exporter or by a buyer, and then you're going to be in real trouble because no one likes a pesticide residue in edible commodities. We also tell people that herbicides must be kept very far away from fungicides and insecticides because of the possibility of a leak from a herbicide drum falling onto a fungicide drum or insecticide drum. And when you make up your fungicide mixture or the insecticide spray mixture, and there's a little bit of herbicide in that spray mixture, it can cause serious damage to your crop or your fodder or your feed camp where you apply those particular products to control insect or control fungi. And I've seen it happening where there was a contamination of 2,4-D, sorry, in an insecticide spray tank, and where somebody wiped out an entire crop because of the 2,4-D. What the Act in South Africa demands, and these are not only Act 36, which controls our pesticides, but also the Hazardous Substances Act and also the Department of Labor's Act on or regulations on hazardous chemicals. They demand that all chemicals which are classified as danger by the new GHS system must be locked away in a separate unit within the store. So we tell people, if you look at the picture on the right-hand side, that's a typical good wire cage where you can put your danger classified compounds into that particular part. It is locked up every night, and it is kept under very strict control by the depot manager. On the left-hand side, you also see a nice store, but that is your normal chemical that can be classified only as hazard, not dangerous. So the dangerous stuff must be away. And the reason for that is to safeguard people again from getting into contact with them that don't know about the danger of these particular chemicals. From a dairy farmer perspective, I do not see a problem in stocking your ectoparasiticides, in other words, your porons or your cattle sprays in your pesticide store, but it's a good idea to keep them away from the normal agrochemicals that are used on crops or fodder or felt and grazing, and keep them in a separate corner so that people don't confuse the herbicide, for example, with an ectoparasiticide, because despite the fact that our labeling in South Africa is very first world class, people seldom read the label, and the worst of all can happen to you if your farm worker takes, for example, an insecticide drum instead of an ectoparasiticide drum, and they dose your cows for that, and you get a total wipeout of your dairy herd. I would also like to believe that for the safety of your animals, any of the insecticides, in other words, the ectoparasiticides or anthelmintics, and your veterinary medicines like antibiotics and the vaccines must be in a totally separate store. And I think we all know by now as dairy farmers that our veterinary medicines are preferably stored in a cold storage facility, especially with the vaccines that need to maintain the cold chain, otherwise they might not work. So this is what I've given you now. It's actually only a 10-minute sort of story on a whole day thing that we do for our normal crop farmers. But take note then that a pesticide store is a very important component of farm in terms of pesticide safety and the prudent use of pesticides. So when it comes then to labels, there's a grave misconception in our country, and I do believe I see the same grave misconception all around the Western world, all around Africa, in the Far East and Middle East, where I have a lot of contacts and done some work, is the fact that people think that the label of a pesticide or a stock remedy or a veterinary medicine is an advisory piece of paper. And that is a misconception. What I need to tell you this morning, and I would like you to take to heart, is the fact that any label on any pesticide or any stock remedy or any veterinary medicine which is registered on Act 101 of 1965, which is the Medicines and Related Controlled Substances Act, is a command for you as the user of the pesticide to follow the indications on the label strictly. Why would that be? Because the company who got that particular product registered as a veterinary medicine or stock remedy or a pesticide had to do a lot of development work, which involves efficacy trials, which involve safety trials, which involve compatibility trials to make sure that that particular product is compatible with my dairy cow, or compatible with my fodder, or compatible with my lucerne. And when it's used according to the label, then I can expect it to do the job. There won't be a risk of safety for the environment and for my dairy cows, myself. And also, there won't be an excessive residue of that particular product in the commodity that will be eaten by the cows or eaten by the people in terms of a processed dairy product. So take note, please, that you must read the label. You must read the instructions as if they command you to do it. It is no different from a prescription when you go to a medical practitioner that gives you a prescription for antibiotic and tell you to take 1 gram of doxycycline for 10 days if you have tick bite fever. So that is very important. Label instructions is a command to yourself. Take note then, if there are any veterinarians on the call this morning, that veterinarians are basically excluded from the command of Act number 36 of 1947 to use stock remedies strictly according to label. So they are allowed to use a stock remedy, what we call off-label, if they do it themselves on the dairy cow or the dog or the cat or whatever they want to do. because they are specialists in that particular field. And they also allowed them to compound a veterinary medicine. And I don't want to go into much into that, but it's basically where they make up a veterinary medicine under certain conditions of Act Number 1 of 101 of 1965. But this privilege is a privilege for registered veterinarians. It is not applicable to you or to me or the farmer or the employee. So you and myself and everybody else out there who's an end user of a pesticide have to apply a pesticide according to Act Number 36 of 1947, instructions on the labels. Otherwise, you contravene the Act. And the worst of all is not contravening the Act, is causing that damage to your environment because of the fact that you did not follow the labels properly. Now, just a few words about the new globally harmonized system for the labeling and classification of hazardous chemicals. We have just gone into the judicious system in South Africa, and the labels look a bit different from what you normally used to. So the things to look out for are the hazard symbols. So the hazard symbols are an indication of what the intrinsic property of the chemical is inside the container. Now remember, a hazard is not necessarily a risk. Something might be of severe toxicity with a skull and crossbones, but if it's used properly, the risk is virtually near zero. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. So the hazard symbols must be on the label from now on with a hazard signal word. And the signal word will be either danger or warning, or if it's like a biological, there might not be any signal word. So that is to indicate to people what is the level of the danger of the compound. Is it danger, which means you've got to be exceptionally careful, or warning doesn't mean you've got to be careful. It also gives us then concurrent precautionary statements to inform people about the prevention. In other words, like what personal protective equipment you need to use, to keep it out of reach of children and pets, to read the label before it's used, what to do in the case of exposure to a pesticide, something about the storage, and then eventually also what to do with the empty packaging at the end of the life cycle and any leftover stock. And I think we all know that all labels have directions for use, which I told you now on the previous slide, is actually a command. Now, let me give you a very quick overview of the idea of hazard versus risk, because even in our state departments, people don't understand this. So the hazard of a chemical is that intrinsic property. For example, if you think about, and I've given you some pictures here, I'm not going to talk pictures in particular, but I've given you the picture there of a typical pistol or a handgun. That is intrinsically a hazardous object. But when that hazardous object is locked away in my safe at home, there is no risk to it. But if you hand that hazardous object then over to a person, you create an extremely risky situation if that person is not in, or if you're not in the good books of the person, like that lady pointing the firearm at us. It's the same with agrochemicals, the same as stock remedies. So they might be hazardous in the container, like paraquat, which we know is a very toxic substance. But they don't become a risk unless the can is opened and used by a person. So take that note of that, please, that even with highly hazardous substances, we can use them safely without creating a risk. But there's also cases where you work with a low hazard substance and create an extreme risk for yourself because you don't follow the label instructions. So what I again want to reiterate, and I think I must have mentioned this phrase a billion times in my life, is follow the label instructions down to the last point. Now look at the pictures out there. You can see the lady handling the hazardous substance. There is a minimal risk because she hasn't opened the stuff. You'll see the other picture there of the person working with the chemical, looking at the chemical starting and becoming a risk himself. But look at the bottom. There's a person spraying a pesticide with a knapsack spray, without face cover, without proper gloves and stuff. He is sitting at a high risk situation because he is not managing the risk properly. So you can take any case with any substance that is a hazardous substance and bring the risk down if you just follow the label instructions and look at all the safety precautions. So when it comes then down to the handling, the measuring, the mixing, application of agrochemicals on dairy farm, this is the crunch of the matter. And you'll see that I've made a sort of blend between crops and animals because it is very often the case where I live in other parts of the country, the dairy farms are not just dairy farms, but they're also crop farms. So very important things I think to take note of is listed on this particular slide. So what I would like to tell you for a start is make sure you have the right equipment. And the right equipment is not only your spray apparatus or your application apparatus or your dip tank or your crush where you put your cows in when you want to do spraying with them in a spray race or dipping or using a pour on or something with an anti-helminth, but get your equipment ready. And especially when you have to make up a spray mixture, like a spray race mixture, or you're going to do a spray application onto your fodder feed in the camp, then you need to have everything measured out accurately, because the labels tell us, for example, you've got to use 10 ml of this particular product per liter, or you've got to use 4.5 kilograms per liter of paraquat in a spray tank to do the application appropriately. And there are measuring kits available, and if anybody would like to know, they can contact me, because one of our CropLife SA members have a tailor-made measuring kit available for farmers with all the equipment in there, plus a bit of personal protective equipment, so that you can measure out your agrochemicals or your stock remedies accurately. It's not only about the accuracy of the measurement and the safety aspect of it, but it's also saving you money, because if you just do like I was taught in my young days working in the farm, that you throw into the tank until you see it looks white, then you actually waste your chemicals, and chemicals nowadays cost a fortune. So it is a money-saving exercise, also a safety exercise. But then you start reading the label. And I always tell people, in my case, I know a lot of pesticide labels because I've been working with them for 40 years, but I make a point of it myself. Every time I pick up a pesticide, I read the label, I read the instructions, because chemical labels can differ from month to month or year to year, because companies might change the formulation or they might change the dose rate. So you need to read the instructions to make sure you know exactly what you need to do before you start measuring, mixing, or apply it, and then ask yourself very critical questions. And I'm gonna go through them not word by word, but I'll rather talk around them. First thing is that particular label of that product that you're handling currently. Is that product registered for that application? In other words, is that product registered for dairy cows? Is that product registered, for example, for my let's say, for example, a feed crop like my alfalfa or my lucerne or my ryegrass? Is it registered? If it's not on the label, put it down, because you may by law not apply it. Secondly, if it is registered for that particular application on the dairy cows or then on your fodder crop, is it registered for that particular pest, like, for example, armyworm that you might find, or bollworm that you might find in your fodder crop, or you might find smut in your crop, which is a disease, or there might be weeds. Or if you think about, for example, an active parasiticide, is that particular product registered for fleas and for ticks and for flies, for horn flies and dairy cow? If it's not on the label, put the product down, because it is not registered, it wasn't tested, it wasn't approved. So you're taking a massive risk if you do not check it to make sure that the product is registered for the crop or the animal, and the complementary disease, weed, or pest that will be on the crop or the animal. For yourself as the user, and for the environment and the people around you, and for your animals, look at the precautions and the warnings, because those are your barriers against the hazards becoming risks. So those things people often don't read. And when I go around onto farms and I see people walking around without any personal protective equipment, I get the real absolute shivers, because I wonder to myself, when am I going to get the call that that this particular farm is going to call me up and say one of my staff got poisoned because they didn't use the right personal protective equipment, or they used it in the wrong weather conditions. So the warnings and precautions are critically important for self-protection, protection of our animals, and protection of our crops. You also have to ask yourself the question, do I have clean water? Now, clean water in the case of the mixing up of an agrochemical or a stock remedy means potable water that you can drink from a tap or from a resource. And very often people use bottled water, which is very alkaline, or as we call it in simple terms, hard, then you need to have the right adjuvant to adjust that water hardness and the pH, otherwise the chemical will not work effectively. Then also look at the mixing sequence, because it tells you, for example, you first fill the tank up with half the volume of water, then you put in your SL, then you put in your WGs, and so every label will tell you what is the mixing sequence. And I've had such a good laugh about 4 years ago when I saw a picture coming from the Western Cape where the farm workers unfortunately put the adjuvant in first, and when they added the other chemicals, there was a mount of foam around them because they didn't follow the mixing sequence. So the whole mixing effect was wrong, and they wasted all the chemicals. Then where people fall flat on the earth in terms of the application is by not doing the dosage correctly. Now, the dosage on a label of an agrochemical or a stock remedy is there for a purpose. It is there to tell you what is the required amount of the chemical on the crop or the animal to make sure it does the job for you correctly without causing a risk. If you overdose, there's a risk. If you underdose, there's also risk. The risk might be that you damage the animal or kill the crop. And the underdosing means that you might create resistance in the ectoparasite or in the pest or disease or the weed that you apply the pesticide to on your crop. So you need to make sure that you adjust your doses effectively and according to the label. And like I said earlier on this morning to my colleague here, that is where many people have a serious issue on interpreting a label to work out what is the right sort of the right dose rate. And then you've got to do the calculation to decide how much of my chemical must go into the spray tank before I apply it, and to make sure it is the right dose. The last critical question here that you need to ask yourself, and this is where I am getting very jittery about South African agricultural arena, is that very few people use personal protective equipment. And if they use personal protective equipment, it is very often unsuitable. Now, I've been working with chemicals since my young days as a student at university, and then later on doing cleanups of uplift pesticide stocks and going out to sites where there was a chemical disaster. And I must honestly tell you, I've never been poisoned because I'm too scared of not using my PPE. It comes down again to working with hazardous chemicals. If you do the right thing and use the right PPE, there is virtually no risk for yourself. So in CropLife South Africa, we have a very nice little poster which we designed to give out to people, and you can see our little mannequin there with all the equipment. So we always tell people the non-negotiable items for personal protective equipment is a proper overall, and mostly a good lightweight cotton overall that will trap any chemical fumes coming your way, rubber boots, rubber gloves, facial protection, and mostly not a visor like you see on a mannequin, but a nose and mouth cover, and then a hat. So that is your barrier against being contaminated by the chemical. And if you look at the bottom little script there, the Occupational Health and Safety Act compels farm workers and farmers and myself as a person working with chemicals who handle pesticide and apply a pesticide to wear the appropriate personal protective equipment. And the question is, how do I know? You go and check the warnings and the precautions, the labels, because that will tell you what do I need to use when I apply my pesticide on the farm. So two examples you can see there. The man up in Spain doing application of a pesticide, I think it might be citrus if something not mistaken, but that's a good example of a person wearing the right personal protective equipment. So this is a poor guy in Sri Lanka applying the pesticide there. He is at massive risk because he's got no sign whatsoever of any PPE. So the guy in the top can work for 40 years, no problem. The guy in the bottom can work for 5 years, and he will develop some kind of disease because of being exposed to pesticides. But now, what is also amazing is the fact that when I drive around the country and I see people on the tractor or working with the cattle, putting on an ectoparasite, and they're busy either drinking water or drinking a beverage or eating or smoking. These things are technically and basically forbidden when you work with a pesticide. You may not smoke, you may not eat, you may not drink when you work with a pesticide. Rather plan your day properly, do all your eating and drinking, and I think I should say it loud up and clear because everybody knows that I do not like the idea of smoking at all. So if you smoke, stop smoking completely, not even when you're working with pesticides, but just stop smoking. But plan your day properly. You can do your ablutions, you're eating and drinking before the time. And at the end of the day, when you're done, remove your PPE, decontaminate yourself, and then eat and drink as much as you want. But please don't do it, because these are the guaranteed routes of getting a pesticide into the human body. And our principle is that even if you work with a benign compound like glyphosate, we don't want a foreign molecule to enter your body when you work with it, because it is not supposed to be in your body. And who knows what can happen to you when you get that into your body. Okay, so now you've got your PPE on. You've got your spray mixture that you made up when you follow the label instructions and everything is 100%. Now you start looking at the broader safety aspects. And I must say that it is interesting that people like to watch spray operations because it's quite spectacular. You see a guy with a knapsack walking, or a tractor, or even an aircraft spraying. The spectators come around. Cattle, I find cattle very, very inquisitive, and horses also. When they see somebody walking with something funny, they come and see, what is this man doing? It's always the anticipation, always maybe that maybe our owner is bringing us some nice fodder for them. Wildlife also. I've seen wildlife coming up to a spray operation and standing to see what people are doing out there. And lo and behold, I don't think there's a single South African farmer who doesn't have his own dog. Doesn't matter whether he's a smallholder farmer or a commercial farmer, you all have a dog. Pets go along as a rule, in the bucket, in the field, in the crop field, all over the place they go along. And poultry are all around the farmsteads and in the crops everywhere. And children are sometimes accompanied during the holidays. And then also my favorite is the poor bees that help us with pollination all day. Now, what I want to tell you is these things are not supposed to be present when you do any application of any pesticide. Doesn't matter whether it's danger or harmful or nothing, they're not supposed to be there. So you have the mandate to tell people, we don't want you anywhere close to crop. Make sure your cattle are not in the camp. If there's any wildlife, chase them away. If there's any bees, ask the beekeeper to remove them. Children may not be there. Pregnant women may not be there. Take the poultry away. And don't take your dog along when you apply the pesticide, because you're going to put them in harm's way if they make contact with the pesticide. You also need to check the weather conditions. Okay, and the optimal weather conditions are sunny skies for at least 6 hours. And the principle behind that is that you need to bind the chemical properly to the surface of the crop or the fodder that you might be spraying for your cattle, or even then on a dairy cow, when you apply an active parasiticide, it must bind properly to the skin and to the hair to make sure it does the job. Because if there's rain in a short period of time after application, it might wash the chemical off, because not all the chemicals are rain fast within about 4 hours. We tell people, plan your day properly, that you've got a nice clear sunny day, and that you can allow your chemical then to bond and start doing the job on the target itself. You only apply after the dew is gone, because otherwise you dilute the chemical on the target surface, and that's going to be the case of not being effective. And where I live in the Eastern Cape, I often wonder to myself, when do farmers have a chance to apply a pesticide? Because the wind in our place pumps like mad. I measured winds in my own place 112 km per hour. So the guideline that you will see on pesticide labels is that it's best to have a wind of 5 to 10 kilometers per hour. And at the most 15 kilometers per hour, because of the fact the wind helps to deposit the chemical onto the target. But if the wind goes over 15 kilometers per hour, it causes a drift onto non-target areas. When it works with glyphosate, the maximum wind velocity cannot exceed 10 kilometers per hour, because glyphosate is a non-selective systemic contact herbicide. So if it goes off target, it can kill the environment, it can kill other people's crops. And the optimal temperature is between 10 and 30. Now, if it's over 30, what happens then with that spray droplet, it might evaporate completely before it hits the target, and you don't even get your active ingredient molecule onto the surface of the target. If it's below 10 degrees Celsius, it can hang in the air and will take a long time to get onto the target. It might drift off the target and cause damage somewhere else. And you see the last picture on the right hand side, that's what we call a temperature inversion, and that you can quite easily see very often on a cold winter's morning, and And that happens when you've got cold air on the surface of the earth. And on top of that is a layer of warm air, so there's no convection happening. And if you spray in those conditions, the chemicals hang in the air and they drift off target and they cause crop damage somewhere else. So these are very, very short little notices of the safety when you do the application of chemicals. But for you as dairy farmers, I wanted to put in this slide that I don't share with my crop members because it is a very important factor coming up, and I had a discussion with Jonken now before we started the session here, is what is the purpose of the listing of a withholding period, or what we call a pre-harvest or a pre-grading interval on a pesticide or a stock remedy for that matter? It is there as a safety factor. So in other words, it tells you if you apply a pesticide on a particular day, you've got to add on the withholding period or the pre-harvest interval time onto that application to say at 81 days after application, my crop is now safe for use. It goes also with ectoparasiticides. You will often see that you've got ectoparasiticides that may not be applied to dairy cattle because they become systemic and they deposit the chemicals into the milk. And I will not be the one that's going to be very comfortable to drink milk which is loaded with something like fipronil. Even fipronil is an excellent ectoparasiticide. I don't want that in my milk because I don't know the molecule to be any good of my body. So you must make sure that you check on your label. First of all, is it right to put it onto my dairy cow or onto my crop? And if I do it on my dairy cow onto my crop, how long do I have to wait before I can then use the milk, or can I slaughter the cow, or can I allow the cow to go into the paddock again and to graze that particular crop? So it then also links up to the maximum residue value, which is a regulated maximum concentration of the substance on the edible commodity. That is under the Food and Cosmetics Act. And every year they publish that as a listing to say that this is the maximum amount of chemical per kilogram in the commodity. For example, you see down there the cypermethrin on the edible commodity, like and I used alpha there. The PHI is 14 days. In other words, if you apply it today, you have to wait 14 days before your cows are allowed to go back into the paddock and to graze their alpha. And the maximum residue level allowed in the alpha then is 0.5 milligram per kilogram. Now, I chose another chemical, methanol, which is a carbamate, which is an exceptionally toxic chemical. It is like deadly toxic. If you get that into your body, you've got basically 12 minutes before you expire. But look at this now. It has a PHI of only 7 days. It has a maximum residue limit of 0.1 milligram per kilogram. You can ask me the question, but why? Cypermethrin, which we know is a very soft pyrethroid, actually a fantastic pyrethroid to use in many cases. It's got a 14-day PHI compared to methanol, which is now exceptionally toxic with only 7 days. It is about the physical nature of the chemical, because cypermethrin is a much more robust molecule than methanol. So methanol breaks down rapidly compared to cypermethrin, which does not break down rapidly. So cypermethrin is much safer in inverted commas, and I do not even know how to use the word actually when I talk about it, but much safer than methanol in this context, and that's why the MRL for that. So the allowed maximum concentration is 0.5 milligram per kilogram compared to methanol, which is much more toxic and only allowed at a level of 0.1 milligram per kilogram. So you have to make sure that you check on the label what is the pre-harvest interval, or what is the time after I dose my cows with an anthelmintic or with an ectoparasiticide before I can use the milk again for human consumption. It might mean that you withdraw the cows then from your dairy, your milk harvesting or the milking process for a couple of days to allow the chemical to do the job and to work out of the system before you put them back in the parlor to milk the cows. But that is in your hands as the dairy farmer. So the bottom one is the one that scares me, is because I see dairy cows walking in paddocks and camps where pesticides are being applied. The principle is that no animal and no person, except for the person applying the pesticide, may be present in a paddock or a camp when the pesticide is applied. You have to remove your dairy cows, and you have to make sure that you follow the PHI for the health of the cow and for your own dairy food product safety compliance. Because if a food processor or an exporter or the Department of Health, if they ever wake up and they do food safety compliance checks and they find residues in your dairy product, you're going to be in serious trouble. You might have shut down your dairy farm. But please also bear in mind that the cow is a living organism. It might not talk like us, but it's also something with, I wouldn't like to use the word a right, but the right to a safe environment. So I hate the idea that I've picked up in the Eastern Cape that people talk very fast ad lib on paddocks, and it's not even registered to be used on paddocks for dairy cows. And who knows what is sitting in the milk, and who knows what effect that would have on the cow. So make sure no cows in the camps. Make sure that you keep the cows out of the camp for that period of time specified on the label. It will say for grazing, for example, for cypermethrin, 14 days before you allow them to go back. For the methanol, 7 days. For other chemicals, it might even be longer. And what I would also like to tell you is, I know chemicals cost a fortune. I know agriculture is expensive because I can see the effect of that on the food prices on the shelves. But don't fall for the cheap talk of an agent coming to you to try and sell you an unregistered agricultural chemical, stock remedy, or veterinary medicine. The country is flooded with it. There are unregistered vaccines on the market that I feel the government should shut the operation down completely, because these things are like biological warfare agents. There are people selling stock remedies over the internet. There's people selling agricultural remedies over the internet, which are unregistered. Do not buy them. If it's a stock remedy, it must have a gene number. If it's an agricultural remedy, it must have an L number. If it's a veterinary medicine, it must have a registration number under Act 101. If it doesn't have it, don't buy it, don't use it. And never make your own homemade concoction as an ectoparasiticide. And I know what people do. They take canola oil, they take deltamethrin or cypermethrin, they throw a bit of diesel into that, and I've seen dairies going completely under where they kill all the cows in one spot because of making their own concoction. So the last section, quickly. It is your job as the person applying the pesticide or the ectoparasiticide in your dairy cows after working to decontaminate yourself properly. So once you've taken your PP off, I'm not going to go to all the details, but wash your hands properly. Not like a child. You know what children do? They wash hands for 10 seconds. You must wash your hands for 2 minutes. You wash your face and neck in your throat. And then preferably take a cool shower to prevent the chemicals from entering the pores, because warm water opens the pores. And you don't take your personal protective equipment home. It must be left at work. It must be cleaned every day after work and left in the store in the secure locker. That is your job, to safeguard yourself against any chemical contamination. And I can honestly say I've never been contaminated because I'm too scared. I follow the rules 100%. So I want you to take note of that. Then I also want to ask you to join CropLife South Africa in our endeavor to remove every single empty pesticide container from the farm by, first of all, doing the triple rinsing process. You can check it on our website. I don't want to go into all the details now, but triple rinsing is the way to remove 99.7% of all the chemicals in the container. And that container is now nominally empty. You can go back into the circular economy, and we can make new containers. We can make other plastic commodities from that. It is your job as the farmer or the waste generator to triple rinse them, to make sure that they are clean, and to contact one of the people in the CropLife list of certified recyclers to remove it from your farm or to take it to their depot. And there are ample of them all over the country to even service our dairy farmers. So there's no reason why an empty container should be on a farm. And there's particularly no reason why an empty container should be in the hands of anybody to use it for an edible commodity or for a drink or for water. So you can go onto our website. You will get the list there. We update it. This is actually an old list, but we update the list on a regular basis. If you want any more information, you can also contact me. I'll give you my cell phone at the end of the presentation. And then I also want to just quickly wrap up by saying, never leave spray mist in your tank. You must always clean your application equipment directly after use so that you don't have chemicals remaining behind, because they are aggressive They can damage your spray tank, or they can actually sit there. And the next day, you might not even know what's in the spray tank. You think it might be insecticide. It might be herbicide. You got your crop and you wipe your crop. So clean it up properly, and you use your PPE while you clean it up. Not touch the guy who's up there, because he doesn't have PPE. His arms are open. He's got his nose, his eyes, and the hand cover. What about the face? What about the arm? It's not the right way to do it. You've got to wear your PPE. And then, lastly, any leftover chemicals or ectoparasiticides or any other thing else must be properly closed. They go back into your store. They get locked in back into your logbook of the chemicals and your stock remedies in the book, and you keep your records properly, and then you decontaminate your body, and after everything is done, you lock your store. Right? And then my last slide is just a couple of pointers on how to prevent poisoning by pesticides. Now, I run a poison center, which is my own private thing, and I get 3,500 calls per year of exposure by to pesticides in case of people, pets, and farm animals. And I've seen the most hideous things in my life. So what I would like to tell you is, if you follow the label 100%, the chance of a mishap is 0%. If you keep all the pesticides locked away, no child, no animal can ever be poisoned. All the dark poisons I get on a regular basis, which is 7 per day, is because they were not locked away. Keep everything, people and animals away while you apply the pesticide. Now, talking to you at dairy farmer, I don't want to see a dairy cow again in the paddock in my area while people are applying a pesticide. Use your PPE. It is your job. Safeguard yourself. And I always tell people, if you don't even safeguard yourself, how can you safeguard the people around you? How can you safeguard the environment around you? How can you safeguard your dairy cows if you don't even protect yourself? Keep your equipment in good order, working order. I see people working with a knapsack and there's water pumping out of the pipes and the gates, everything else, because the seals are broken. So keep your stuff in good working order. Don't spray in poor weather conditions. And in our part of the world where I live, man, if we have a clear day, that's the day to spray, but not when the wind is pumping at 45 knots. You can't take exercise in those particular conditions. And I don't even want to talk about it, because smoking and eating and drinking is something which really bothers me a lot. But don't do it, because you're risking yourself. And please, ladies and gentlemen, you as a farmer, you never allow your farm workers to take it into container for any food or drinks, because I've had 4 instances where entire families would wipe out, in other words, dead after using an empty container for the cooking oil, the drinking water, or even the homemade beer. So never ever allow that. It is dangerous for people. So don't eat the crops, or don't allow your dairy cow to eat the crop if it is within the withholding period. Wait until withholding period expired, then harvest the crop and eat it, or allow dairy cows to go in the paddock, and then you'll be safe. And the last one is there's also a statement under the precaution to say, what is the re-entry period? In other words, if I apply a pesticide onto my paddock today, how long must I wait before I can go into the paddock without causing any risk to myself? It might also say you can only enter the paddock on the second day if you work and you wear the right and appropriate equipment. And that is my story for today. You will see my number there. Take down my number, take down my email. You're welcome to WhatsApp me. I prefer the WhatsApps to this question or so, because the call rate is quite hectic. And then you are definitely and invited, most welcomely, to contact me at my email address for any communication or anything about pesticide safety or anything related to pesticides. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gerard, for that presentation. I must say I can feel and see your passion for your industry and what you do. And I really appreciate it if a person speaks with so much passion. To the audience, are there any questions from your side? We've got a few minutes for questions. So please type them into the question bar and I will ask them to Gerard. Gerard, I've got 2 questions for you. And my first question that I want to ask is, What is the potential for agricultural chemicals that are used on a dairy farm to end up as a residue in a dairy product?
Adele, I've taken my headset off. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, yeah, no, can hear you definitely. Thank you.
The potential is 100% to be taken up by the dairy cow and to be deposited in the dairy product. It should not be a concern, because if you use your agrochemicals appropriately and you hold yourself within the PHI, residue will be below or at the MRL. It's completely acceptable by society and by regulatory authorities. So it should not be a problem, but they will enter the food chain, unfortunately. But doesn't mean they pose a risk. If you go with them right way, it will be under the MRL, and that's completely safe for consumption by people and even consumption by animals.
And I think, like you've said now in your summary as well, all of that is only possible if a person is following the label, doing it the right way, following the procedures in the right way. And like you also mentioned, the withholding period, the great importance of the withholding periods as well of these chemicals that we use. Who carries the burden of legal use of agricultural chemicals on a dairy farm?
I'm very glad you asked the question, because there's a conception amongst our farmers in the country that they must follow the advice of the person selling the chemical. And I'm talking about here the agrochemicals and the stock remedies. They think that those people, we call them crop advisors or agents, they think those people are the ones responsible for giving the right advice. Remember, the Act says the only legal advice you can give is that on the label of the container. So it is the mandate and responsibility of the end user, either with the farmer or in my case the homeowner, to use the chemical according to the label, irrespective of what advice I might get from an agent, a manufacturer, a consultant, a person like myself who specializes in pesticides. It is your duty as a person who uses the chemical to follow the label instructions. If there's any mishap and you acted upon the incorrect advice of somebody else, you've got no recourse in the law, because the law says, in terms of Section 7 of the Act and Regulation 1716 of the Act, that you must follow the label to the last T.
And like you've also mentioned, all of that in terms of keeping your records up to date is obviously also very important, because that's the only thing that you've got to nearly like a keep out of jail card. If your records is not done correctly and chemicals aren't, placed away in a decent cupboard, like you said, then those are all things that then also makes it even worse for you. Then I think my last question that I've got here is, what is the best protocol for the safe disposal of hazardous chemical containers when not removed by the supplier of the chemicals?
Well, like I said in my second or first slide, is we have the principle of triple rinsing, which works like a bomb. The tests have been done internationally. In normal chemistry, you learn it. I've done some tests in South Africa, my own also. If you follow the triple rinsing procedure, in other words, you triple rinse the container, or you rinse the container 3 times in succession with 1/4 of the volume clean water, and you decant that rinse water back into your spray tank. In other words, you don't dispose of it in the environment. Then that chemical container is deemed to be nominally empty. In other words, it is no longer a hazardous object, and it can go into the circular economy. And in South Africa, we have 182 certified CropLife SA recyclers that can take it off your hands. You can either call them up and ask them when you can drop it down, or some of them even drive around and go to farm to collect it. So that is the way to get rid of a container. But if you don't rinse the container out, then it is going to be your responsibility to contact a hazardous waste management company, get the containers collected, and the total cost for that is 48,000 rand per ton to dispose of contaminated containers and old pesticides. So don't get yourself into that particular spot. You've got to pay a fortune. Triple rinsing is a simple process. It It's a cheap process, creates jobs for other people, and you return valuable plastic then to the circular economy. So that's what you need to do.
Okay, I'm sure of it. That answers the question. There's actually one last question that came in now as well. Can agricultural chemicals for flies and rodents be safely used in dairies, or is it prohibited?
No, there are definitely some of the fly remedies that are certified to be used like they would call in a hazard situation. In other words, you can use some of these automatic dispensers with a fly remedy and a fly repellent inside your dairy. And you can also use rodenticide, but I would recommend you put them on the outside of your milk parlor or your dairy sheds. And remember one thing which is important, all rodenticides indicate on the labels they must be used in a bait station so that your favorite dog and the children and the farm children don't get access to it and eat it and get poisoned. So they can be used safely in a dairy situation or even in your kraals if you read the labels and you follow the instructions meticulously. And again, if people want to contact me about that, there are a lot of things I can offer them in terms of which chemicals to use in what situation and how to use it safely, because flies are a real menace in dairies. And if you do your fly control correctly, you won't see a fly at all. Same with rodents. And it's important to control flies and rodents because remember, they are vectors for animal disease and also for dairy cow disease. So you have to control them, but in the right way.
Okay, I've got a question here from someone, and I think the answer probably from your side is going to be that she must get into contact with you. But she says, yeah, I have some suppliers that have left over of obsolete chemicals that they are battling with disposing of, as the suppliers don't want to collect them. And we can't find someone that will collect and dispose of this. What can my supplier do? So I assume it's still full bottles of chemicals, and because they are obsolete now, no, the supplier doesn't want to collect it. So can they get into contact with you, or is there some other
Yeah.
advice that you can provide?
They must definitely get into contact with me because remember, CropLife South Africa is registered by the Department of Environmental Affairs as what we call a product responsibility organization. So we have a mandate to take care of obsolete pesticides, but only obsolete pesticides. If it's anything to do with stock remedies, we're not allowed to touch it. But you can contact me, I can talk to the farmers, I can guide them on what to do, and we can assist them with that disposal. And we've got a contract with a company that can do disposal, and I always arrange a better price for the clients out there. So they must certainly contact me. We can certainly help them out with advice and with some technical support.
Fantastic. Ilse, I'm sure of it, that answers your question, and you can then be in contact with Gerard. Salmarie Lowe also said, gave us an interesting tip here. She said that she suggests that after triple rinsing, what people can do is make the containers full of holes. So to make sure that people can't utilize the containers, to carry water or do anything. So it's to make sure that it's not usable again. So
that is what you will see also on our triple rinse poster. We've got them available in, I think, 7 languages.
Okay, 100%. Okay, Ilse, I will definitely make sure that you get the contact details. I will send that through to you. And Gerard, I nearly said doctor, and if I said doctor, I would have been in trouble because he said that there's a fine if you say that. But Gerard, thank you so much for your time today. I know that you're a very busy man, and we really appreciate that you spent this morning with us talking about a very, very important topic. And like you said, you've seen when things go bad, they really go bad. And, people always don't think about a problem when it's going to occur. They always think why they shouldn't do it or what shortcut they can take. But I think this is a type of industry, where you're working with chemicals and things like that, where there's no shortcut. You either do it the right way or you're going to not have such a good experience. And, like you said, you've seen a lot of bad things. So thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. So with that,
You're
ladies
most
and
welcome.
gentlemen, thank you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end. And like I said in the beginning, the webinar has been recorded. The recording as well as the presentation will be available on our website before the end of the week. Please also note that you will tomorrow receive an email and you will get an attendance certificate to say that you've attended the webinar this morning. Please note, it's a once-off. It gets generated by the system. So if you don't print and save that certificate, it's lost. I cannot reissue you a certificate again. It's not registered with any CPD points or anything to that effect. It's just to say that you've attended the webinar this morning. So thank you very much for that. The DSA are hosting another webinar in November to the end of November. If I'm not mistaken, it's going to be around about the 22nd of November. So please have a look on our social media. If you are not registered to receive our newsletter, please make sure to register for our newsletter. And also there's a short survey after we end this webinar, and we ask you to please complete that. So with all of that, thank you very much for attending. Have a great day, and may the Booker win on Saturday. Keep well, everybody. Bye-bye.